welcome to XReality Podcast. I'm the host, Dominic Wu, and beside me is my co-host, Donnell, and today's guest, Dylan Fox. Hi, Dylan. Could you share a little bit about your background with us?
Hi, Dominic. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on here. So I am currently the Director of Operations at XR Access, which is a research initiative at Cornell Tech focused on making virtual and augmented reality accessible to people with disabilities. And the way I got here is a little bit winding. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. My parents were in the movie industry, so I always had a bit of appreciation for all the movie magic that goes into making all of these wild and wonderful things that we see in the theaters. And I first got into mechanical engineering because I had, somewhat of a kind of engineer mindset, but I really wanted to make things that people interact with. And it turns out that led me into UX design and kind of cognitive engineering and really trying to think about technology and how people understand it and come to use it. So I worked as a UX designer for a few years on, as it turns out, major entertainment applications. And then a friend of mine brought in his Oculus Rift dev kit into the office way back in 2015 or so. And I saw that, and as a UX designer, my mind just went like, holy moly, this is a whole new domain. How are we going to tell people, how are we going to show people how to use this? How are we going to create the design patterns that are going to influence this and do it in a way that's intuitive for people? And that was just fascinating to me. So that was when I started getting into virtual reality. 2017 or so, I decided to go and get my master's in information management and systems at Berkeley, just to try to better understand design for virtual reality and these emerging systems, but B, a little bit more about the sociology of technology and trying to understand, okay, we have all of this tech out there, but is it actually doing us good as a society? And if not, why not? It was during that time as well that I got into accessibility because I was presenting at a conference and saw some very interesting papers on virtual reality and accessibility, how virtual reality can be used by folks who have low vision or low mobility or low hearing. And that got me thinking, as a UX designer, which is user experience designer, we're often taught that your user needs should always be your primary commandment. Right? Listen to your users. And yet here's this whole swath of users that whose needs are completely ignored, right? There's so many folks that have disabilities that are just told, well, your needs, those don't matter. We're just aiming at the quote unquote mass market. And being, a techno optimist, somebody who saw way too much sci-fi as a kid and had the wild idea that tech could be used to help people, that didn't sit right with me. And so that's how I got into accessibility. And after graduating from the master's, I worked for a bit as a consultant, as a researcher. I got invited back to the School of Optometry at Berkeley to work on augmented reality for folks with low vision. And I got involved with XR Access, first as a volunteer and then as a leader. And that brings me to today.
Wow, this is very cool. Donnell, do you have any questions?
Yes, this is quite fascinating. When you talk about like cognitive, right? Like the whole cognitive engineering aspect of it. And so if I'm a student today, can you give us or give them some insight on if they're interested in doing something like you just described or taking a similar pathway, where can they look for guidance? Where could they look for, someone helping them along the path that could lead to the end result, like where you're at now?
It's a good question because, I think there's a lot of times I know that the guidance I received was, just, study this and then apply to one of the big tech jobs and then you'll get in and you'll have a cushy life. And that it did not actually go the way I expected it to go. I think for me, it was a matter of finding the things that mattered to me, that inspired me, that made me think, hey, this needs to change. There's something here that needs to be invented that hasn't yet, or there's something here that simply won't do, and I need to be the one to fix it, right? Find out what makes you feel that way, and then find good mentors in that field who can help you. Because I know one of the big things with me joining XR Access, and I'll note that here that I have had the privilege to be able to pursue some of these like volunteering opportunities, because I haven't necessarily had to work a million part-time jobs just to pay rent. And that is my privilege that I try to be mindful of. So, hopefully this advice is still usable to most folks out there, but trying to find the places, especially where people are coming together voluntarily to solve some of these problems, I think it's been really helpful for me. Joining groups like XR Access that we're all just kind of volunteers, again, trying to get together to talk about how to make XR more accessible. Joining groups like, I joined the IEEE global initiative on the ethics of extended reality, which just had a lot of people passionate about, again, coming together and fixing some of these issues. There's groups out there like the Virtual World Society that are really good for this. There's groups like Teach Access that are working in accessibility and education. And as much as you can find groups like that and join them and find ways to be helpful and find ways, understand what the people that are informed of these areas are talking about and where the challenges are, and just do what you can to help out. When I started, I was just taking notes. I'm a compulsive note taker. And so I was taking notes during these meetings and emailing them out to everybody. And folks were like, wow, that's useful. Thanks for that. And doing things like that helped me find the people that could teach me and connect me to where I needed to be.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I wanted to say thank you for specifically making the point around having the time, right? Having the time to volunteer and having that space to do that, where some other individuals might be burdened with needing to do the part-time job. Because in the community college space that both Dominic and I work, we see this with our students. They typically have to make that choice on, do I, or I don't even know if it is a choice. It's like, I need to go work, right, and earn a certain amount of money to pay a certain amount of bills, while I might still be interested in potentially changing my career or exploring a new career path, and I have to make those determinations on where do I spend my time versus when do I make my money. So thank you for that, and such an insightful. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I know for me, I've never had luck when it comes to finding employment of just throwing my resume down the black hole resume pits and hoping that somebody gets back to me. I think almost every job I've ever had, it's because I was part of, some group or organization, or just I met somebody somewhere and made those connections. And I kind of hate that that's the case sometimes, because it feels unfair in a lot of ways. But oftentimes those groups, I'm not necessarily talking about like, oh, you have to be in the yacht club and contribute $12 million annually. It's oftentimes groups that are free to join, just local community groups. If you find the places in your own community that are, you find the organizers, you find the people that are bridging the gaps between those that need help and those that are able to provide help, those are very good people to know and very good people to help if you can. And so I think trying to leverage those local community groups as much as you can, and to support them as much as you can, is a really good use of anybody's time that's trying to make these connections.
Yeah, it reminds me of at the beginning when how did I get into the community college? It was because 1 or 2 years ago, I went to AWE and I had a booth there. And I remember the dean of Kenyatta College, Hyla. She visited my booth and talked to me. And later on, for me, I understand that right now you saw a resume. It's probably not going to work because resume, nobody knows who you are. And every resume was written so well by AI, right? Who can understand, who knows who's the person behind this resume, right? So that's why people tend to hire. And there are so many talents on the market, right? So the reason why I got hired is because after that, I start printing out a lot of resume, and I went to a lot of community college or universities. I give away. I just directly go to the department chair because I know chair will hire. So I went there, and usually their assistant will took it. And later on, I remember after I submit to the Kenyatta College, and later on I received a call from Hyla, and she said, "Oh, we talked at AWE," and I was like, "Wow, that's amazing! I got hired." And one of my freelance project from Dublin, UK, it's not the Dublin CA, but it was a 3 months contract UX for AR, kind of like a freelance. And the reason why I got hired is because I saw the hiring manager post on LinkedIn, right? Like, oh, we are looking for a UX designer for AR. And I immediately reached out and shared my resume. And she said, "Oh, I read your book and I love your book." And I immediately got a talk with CEO and got hired. So I think, just keep doing a lot of things that interest you and your work being associated with, like, for example, like when people saw you, talk to you, and you give them some impression. And later on, if there's an opportunity, you reach out or you saw something. And I feel like sometimes when there are a lot of networking events, people will go there, or some people complain about, oh, networking event is useless because I didn't get any job from that. But I think maybe it's more like plant the seed. It's like, hey, we have a great conversation, and I'm not intended to ask you for a job on the spot, right? It's very scary to hire a person you just know. Yeah. So probably after, a couple of years or something, people knew you, you add the person as your friend, and you keep posting some value, some good thinking types of articles, posts, and position yourself as, something. You just keep posting your work. And if there's an opportunity, I think you can connect. So I feel like that's my way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If I could, also, I want to point out his value add. So he took the notes that he was collecting and provided them and sent them back to the group, which made it obvious, right, of his value, right? He took one skill set of his and presented it to the group, and they were able to see his value. You, Dom, you printed out your resume, right, and took them directly, right, to show your value. Like, you're a go-getter. You went and you spoke to them. You showed up. You sought them out, right? I think these are critical pieces for our students who are watching to understand that sometimes you have to go. Sometimes you have to show and display your value to others if you want them to be interested in you in a deeper capacity, in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree, and I understand that right now it's so hard to get any job, especially for new grades, right? And for example, like there are a lot of great groups that is doing something great together. Maybe I remember one example was from another speaker. She said that, there was a new grads join a kind of film shooting, like a opportunity, and she was there and did super awesome job. And everybody in the group, it's like a volunteer opportunity in Hawaii. And she just like, I just did my best. And later on, she got referred to another really good opportunity that is paid. So sometimes when you get put yourself out there, I think there are there's a quote in a job opportunity. If it is not getting paid, then you get the experience or you learn, right? Because you make your value so high, and later on when the opportunity comes, and you will grasp it.
Yeah. Although I would make the distinction because I generally I hate the concept of things like unpaid internships where you're working for exposure. Um, I think the key thing to differentiate here is that a lot of the times when you're doing ideally looking for places to volunteer, those are the places that just do not have money to pay a lot of people, right? So try not to work for free for places that can afford to pay you. Try if you're going to be working for free, do it for places that are this is a very large Venn diagram, places that are doing good and don't have a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. So, um, um, you mentioned that you are, like working as a UC Berkeley research, like a low vision people, accessibility for AR. Can you give us like some, for example, study case of what's the user's problem and how you solve the problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a very long history of people researching new technologies and how they can be applied to supporting folks with low vision or blindness. I think just about every technology you can name, there are research papers that study how it could be applied. And so for us, I was working on two different ways of applying augmented reality to support visually impaired folks. And the first one was when I was in my master's, was using sensory substitution. So both of these are using the HoloLens, which is an augmented reality device that Microsoft used to make. I think they've discontinued at this point. But the fundamental idea on both of these is that you have a device that knows about the environment, right? You have sensors, whether those are cameras or LiDAR or whatever type of information gathering tools that this device has about the environment. And that can help the device build up a 3D map of what is around the user. And for blind and low vision people, then the question becomes, how do we communicate the salient aspects of those 3D maps to the user in a way that's going to help them, navigate and interact with things in day-to-day life? And so when I was in my master's, I did a project with this using sensory substitution, which is instead of using vision at all, we're going to use sound. We're going to basically have aspects of the environment make sound to let you know that they're there. One sound for walls, another for obstacles, and so on and so forth. And then in the work I did after our graduation, when I was working in the School of Optometry, it was about visual augmentation, where we assume you have at least a little bit of vision, because most people that have visual impairments, including the people that are legally blind, still have some level of vision, some ability to detect light or darkness or, shapes. And so instead of trying to completely substitute one sense for another, we're just going to use the vision capabilities, the kind of holographic capabilities of the HoloLens to augment your ability, in this case, to navigate obstacles. We're going to, flash big arrows or like very highly visible things that can point out obstacles in the environment that might be less visible. And yeah, I'd be happy to talk more about any aspect of that if there's something in particular you're interested in.
So, interestingly enough, I was thinking about this the other day. Um, um, with all these fields we exist in, like the magnetic fields and electric, and so I landed on the photon, and I just wondered why we created these photon receptors and why we use it as our primary device to map our environments, right? Like wondering if there was some kind of and just the fact that it comes from a star, right? Like it's off planet, right? The main source of our light. Like, why would we generate this as our method of navigating our own environment? So I am curious, like through your research, some of the things that you found, or was there any particular participant storyline that ended up changing your design approach, or something that you found that ended up being as through your studies, it was like a misconception or something of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a particular part during my master's project, which we called AR for VIPs, augmented reality for visually impaired people, which we got a lot of feedback, both positive and negative on. Uh, there was a particular user interview that really stuck out to me. We were interviewing a woman named Lucy Greco, who is absolutely amazing, superstar web accessibility evangelist at Berkeley before she retired. And we had gone to her with this idea that, and this is before we built anything, right? Always talk to your users in the early and as often as you can, right? Never build something and then take it to somebody and say, hey, this is useful, right? So very early in the process, we were talking about our idea and like what we thought might be useful for it. And we had gone in with this conception that, okay, let's say you're blind, right? And you're trying to navigate through a room. And there are some objects that might make sound, right? If there's a television that is on and is making sound, then you know that's there without having to go up and touch it, right? But there are other objects that don't, right? There's a table that's just sitting there silently. And so part of our kind of value proposition here is, well, if we could make that table make sound, if we could sonify it, then you would know that that table is there without necessarily having to bump into it, right? Or to feel it out with a cane or whatever else. And so that was kind of our core value proposition going into the project. And we brought that to Lucy and she said, well, now hold on a second, because for you, it may seem like bumping into things is a problem, but for us, that's just how we learn where things are, right? For her, the main problem was not necessarily having to use her cane to learn the layout of a room, because that's just how she's used to navigating. For her, one of the big problems was being able to read things in the environment, to know something is there and then being able to read it. Because if there's a sign there, A, you don't know that it's very hard to tell that there is a sign there in the first place. And B, even if you know that there's a sign there, you wouldn't, you're not able to read it unless you pull out your phone and, spin up its app and so on and so forth. And so that really inspired us to shift to the focus of the project. And as another part of our user research, we found out there's something called the Perkins School for the Blind Bus Stop Challenge, which is this idea that if you are, if you are blind, trying to navigate via public transit can be very challenging, because you can have your Google Maps or whatever guide you to the approximate location of a bus stop, but then trying to bridge that last gap to where exactly is the stop. And also, what does the sign say? Can I confirm that it is the right stop, especially in places where there might be multiple bus stops next to each other? That is tricky. And so we ended up shaping the prototype such that the concept was that, let's say there are 3 signs in a row. Can you find those signs, use screen text to speech to kind of identify what the sign says, and then navigate to the one that is your bus stop? That was our main test for that prototype. And that, I think, is going to be a much more useful system compared to one that, just sonifies things in the environment abstractly. And so I think that is an example of one of the why Nothing About Us Without Us is the primary commitment for accessibility, right? You have to talk to people with lived experience in order to understand what their actual problems are before you have any chance at making something useful to solve them.
Such great insight. I think it really highlighted. So we're attempting to work on producing XR assets in a framework and a toolkit for many of the faculty members who are interested in creating these types of tools for the students. And I think your point of, you have to speak to them though. Like, that's just one of the key aspects. Like, I thought that was like, I would never think that, no, I want to bump into the table. I would never think that that's going to be part of the response. But then also saying, well, what does that sign say on the wall that I can't read? And then Now, if I sonify my objects, right, like still, is this something that I need to read or get some kind of direction for? I think that was really a great way to encapsulate the complexity of the true complexity of what we're talking about here, and so that even made me think about Fei Li and talking about spatial intelligence and how that's going to be us and like the way we create and understand these spaces and how it communicates to us and how we communicate with it is really truly the only way that we get to AGI, right? Like it's going to be through the work that you're doing, right? That really, I think is going to close that gap to get us closer to that point because of the nuances, right? Like that you're dealing with. Like there's going to be so many different ways that we can interact and share information through our sensory input model. That's our human being versus the reality that we traverse through. I think that was great. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'll say I think there's a lot of us that are really excited for AI in the aspect that being able to have a conversation with what's effectively a digital assistant, or a digital sighted guide is a really powerful capability, right? You know, if you look at something like, let's say, you're trying to um, microwave some popcorn, right? This example came up from a blind user I talk to all the time. Uh, if you have some of the kind of old school machine vision tools and you had it take a picture of the microwave and tell you what you see, it might say like, you know, microwave, button 1, button 2, button 3, da, 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 and it could like read through the whole thing. But now, if you were to use something like Be My Eyes, you like Be My AI mode, and this is, I think, the one that's been integrated with the Meta Quest smart glasses. You could take a picture and it'll say, oh, you know, it's a microwave. And then you could just ask it, where's the popcorn button? And we can tell you, oh, it's the bottom, you know, third row from the bottom on the left. And then you just press that, right? And that ability to actively query about your environment and receive actionable feedback and have that feedback loop, that is super valuable, right? That is an incredibly powerful tool. And I think that is an application of AI that we're all really excited for. It comes with a lot of challenges in terms of data privacy and a million other things, but it still represents a very powerful potential for accessibility.
Totally agree. And I think that's really like soon we all will be these super enabled beings, right? Like in various capacities. So that, you know, when you talk about creating that tried and, you know, statement that the old adage, a level playing field, I think today more than any of the days before, we're getting closer to that statement. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. You just mentioned that Be My Eyes, right? And when I worked for Meta, we actually, I was working for the Ray-Ban team, and that was one of our kind of like a feature. And if you saw like a Meta Ray-Ban, it has another feature. For example, like when I was working on it, you look at a QR code, and we were trying to like do the action, AI in action, right? You look at the QR code, and the AI will help you to sign up just by voice activate. So yeah, and I remember a long time ago, I interviewed another low vision developer, spatial AI developer. His name is Chris McNally. I don't know whether you heard of him or not. His vision is, he was born with low vision. So imagine you see a picture, right? You see whatever you see in the front, it's black and white and become pixelated. And there's a big donut, black donut cover the most of the vision. Imagine when you see things, there's always a big donut cover whatever you see. And he even show on the screen what he see. And I was like, I couldn't even see anything, right? And so he said that he was a developer and he still can see something. So he was using Unity and change the Magic Leap, because during that time he used Magic Leap to change the contrast of the camera receive. So and also add AI. So he can wear that and navigate through his kitchen. And he said the most important thing for people with low vision is everything needs to stay in the same place all the time. For example, like when he goes to the kitchen and he has to grab like a ketchups, right? He used like a motion to remember everything navigate through his house. If things is getting a little bit different, he couldn't find it, right? And he said that it's really, really convenient to have AI assistant tools because he said that when he was using AI tools with like a smart glass, like a, spatial AI, computer vision, and the AI will tell him that, hey, there's a basket in front of you in a meter, so don't step on it or something. So he just used that AI assisting tools to navigate through his house. So I think what you mentioned that, Be My Eyes, before Be My Eyes, it was more like a peer and peer helping the blind people. For example, like you use an app and you see who is available. And you just like, for example, you want to see like the microwave, which one is popcorn. And you use the kind of like the phone or like the camera. And then the other person will see it and tell you if someone has time, use the peer community power. But I think AI really helps like, instead of fighting a match to tell you what's that, it's AI who use computer vision and immediately tell you. It's more convenient.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think obviously can't speak for the blind low vision community, but a lot of the folks that I've spoken to have really just said they want the same level of independence that everybody else gets, right? They don't want to have to call somebody over to do things for them. They want to be able to do it themselves. And I think AI is potentially a very valuable tool for that, right? It makes it so that you don't have to necessarily call on a volunteer, even though, that is perfectly fine for a lot of use cases. But there's some things that you might want to keep private. There's some things that you maybe just don't want to feel like you have to bother somebody to do. And having that flexibility to choose between, I want a real person to help me with this, or, I think AI is enough to help me with this, is really valuable, especially if you can trust that AI is keeping your data on device and not sending it off to the cloud, such that now that, there's somebody on the internet that has a scan of your home or a picture of your bank statement or whatever else that is that you need help with.
Cool. Yeah, it just reminds me of before I interviewed Thomas, another right now he just released his mixed reality game, like the laser dance. He's the developer, and he said that when he was working on laser dance, he asked all his friends to scan the room and upload to him. Why? Because he needs to. Because laser dance is the game that just imagine you are Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise, right? And your room, you just scan the room, and the room will map lasers, and you need to, lower yourself and get through the laser in a certain amount of time and hit the button, and you pass the game. So he said that he just realized that, wow, how powerful the developer is right now through the, camera, right? You can see everything. And one of my speakers, she mentioned that while she thinks that Meta right now can run a real estate business because Meta knows everybody's room now. And also Meta knows like, in your room, in your, location and what types of stuff you are buying, right? So it's another layer of privacy issue. Yeah. And when Thomas doing the user testing, he said that it's the best because he lived in Spain. So he said that he usually went to a lot of events that has kids, a family group. It's like a big, events that has like a more like a family oriented. And he said that it's really interesting to see like people with all different sizes trying to get through, lower their body, get through those like mixed reality types of like lines, and see how flexible everybody, how to invent an algorithm to generate the lines that is not too hard or too easy for certain types of people. So I think, it's like tied to your user experience and talk to user, do user testing, and also tied to, you mentioned that the privacy issue is better to keep everything in a system.
Yeah, no, there's, I think, a lot to be said for testing with a really wide variety of people, right? I know one of the gaming studios that we work with quite often, because they do amazing work for accessibility, is Owlchemy Labs, spelled like the bird, Owlchemy. They're the creators of games like Vacation Simulator, Cosmonius High, things like that. And they have done some great work with, if you look on, you open up their games and they'll have things like small human mode, where you can hit that and it adjusts the height of all the surfaces to make it better, yes, for kids, but also for people of varying heights, or for people that are sitting down instead of standing up. Right. I think in some of their later games, they have desks where there's just a handle and you can grab and adjust the height of the desk to whatever's comfortable for you. And I think that is a really key example of customizability, which is one of the most important things you can do to make your application accessible, is just let your users customize things to their own needs, right? Whether that's the height of surfaces, whether that's button mappings, being able to use a variety of input methods like voice versus touch, versus haptic feedback, making sure that people can operate your application in using whatever capabilities they have. And that includes both input and output, right? You should be able to give input in a variety of ways. You should be able to give receive output in a variety of ways, in terms of, words on the screen versus spoken aloud versus, in an ideal world, you'd be able to hook up your headset via Bluetooth to an adjustable braille display and let people receive input through touch, right? The more of that you have in your application, the wider a variety of people you're going to be able to have use it, and the better every one of those experiences will be. Because I think we all prefer to be able to have something that's just for us, a nice bespoke suit, as opposed to something that's just kind of off the rack fit for the average person. And that doesn't tend to fit almost anybody really well.
Yeah, I think, for example, like you mentioned that, we design for all, right? And I remember in Microsoft that they have like a user accessibility, and it has a chart, right? For example, if you design for example, like for people who lose their arms, right? If you design for that, people with temporary syndrome will also benefit. For example, like a pregnant woman might temporarily lose the feeling of their limbs. So those people temporarily, for example, if you design for some for people who couldn't hear really well, right? And this experience will also apply to people who probably in a very loud bar, and they also can use these types of device or functions really well, because you've designed for the severe situation and people with temporary situation, even though like a health people, right? People with a healthy body, but sometimes there's a temporary situation that we might get into the people with disability, like the same situation. So I think design for all means that we think of the extreme situation and we solve those problems, and people with the temporarily temporary lose some of their senses, that types of situation, they can also be applied.
Absolutely. No, there's a very well-known thing in accessibility called the curb cut effect, which is the idea that curb cuts, which are those little ramps that go from the sidewalk to the street, those were made for people with wheelchairs, but they provide a ton of benefits to people who ride bicycles or had baby strollers or skateboards or any number of other people, right? And when you design for somebody with a disability, you're helping out everyone.
Mm, yeah. So yeah, you mentioned that in Triple E, right? You join like a XR ethics, right? So what's that about, and what types of like a XR, especially AI? Like, what do you see this like a policy standard should go? We all know that EU, European are very good at setting up the standard, but we all know that right now, the governor is trying to lose all the restriction. And what do you see these types of things? For example, we all know the benefits from XR and AI, but for the protection, privacy standard, what do you see the kind of like, what should this train should be? Yeah.
Yeah. I think there is a tendency right now to say that, well, if we do any regulation at all, then China's going to win the race or something like that, right? Which, frankly, I think is mostly nonsense, right? It's a good cover for people, people to be able to get away with whatever they can in order to earn more money. There's the concept of surveillance capitalism, right? Where, people may not be surveilled for doublethink, for loyalty to the party, but they're still being surveilled to see, hey, what can we sell to these guys? And how can we create a profile of these guys that we know exactly when they're at their most vulnerable and we can send them an ad, right? Which is, I think, not going to help us live up to the possibilities of these technologies, right? I think we need to make sure that as these technologies are growing and improving, that we are keeping up both an understanding of how to best use them and how to monetize them and how to keep them safe. Because otherwise it's going to end very, very dangerously, especially with systems like AI that are autonomous, that are going to be doing more and more stuff at their own direction. There's a lot of challenges. I think the two biggest ones in my mind are privacy and ableism that is built into AI, algorithmic bias. I think with regards to the first, with privacy, we definitely need better legal protections. And I think we also need technological protections because there are ways to make it such that you have to trust fewer people or fewer organizations with your information, right? If you have phone applications, they have to ask for permissions, right? They have to ask for, okay, can I use your camera? Can I use your map? And the platform determined, will ask you, hey, it wants to use this, this, and this. Do you want to let it? And you could say yes or no. And if, something is asking for your camera when it doesn't seem like it should have to know what's on your camera, you could tell that something's up. Right. And I think there's some very interesting possibilities with XR for similar protections. We just had a great discussion at XR Access on privacy. And one of the people I invited for that discussion was the author of a paper called Bystand AR. And the idea of that is that, let's say you are using a facial recognition application, right? And those can be very useful for people that are low vision or have face blindness, things like that. Let's say you're at a hospital and you want to be able to have information about the doctor that you're talking with, right? Now, if you're in a crowded waiting room and you're just running facial recognition, you might get 30 people in addition to the one doctor, right? And if you're using a shady app, that could be 30 people that it now has information about. But what you can do is have something running at the system level that filters it, that says, look, on the system level, it knows you're talking to those 30, that you can see those 30 people. But the only one it's going to give information to the app about is the single person that you've focused eye contact with for at least 2 seconds, right? Or something like that. The exact criteria are malleable. but the idea is that this third-party application doesn't receive information about everybody. It just receives information that it needs to know, right? And you can imagine something for the laser room being similar, where I'm only giving you access to the contours of the room, right? I'm not letting you get high def imagery of everything in my house. It's just enough to be able to map out where the lasers go, right? And that's tricky. I think that's less black and white than just camera access, yes, no. But it's those types of technological protections that are going to help keep us all honest, right? I think things like that. I think as much as we can do on device, because it's a lot easier to verify that whether a device is sending data or not than it is once you send something to the cloud. You're kind of relying on the person you send it to say, yeah, we only used it for what you asked. We just definitely didn't sell it to anybody. There's some interesting proposals around being able to audit those, but it's much safer in general to just be able to keep processing on device. So yeah, there's a lot more to discuss when it comes to privacy. But then I also want to chat a little bit about bias, because I think there's a couple of forms that algorithmic bias comes in. The first one is quite simply that right now, if you ask ChatGPT to code you up a website, chances are that website is not going to be accessible. And that's because ChatGPT is trained on a lot of websites that aren't accessible. So if its input isn't accessible, its output isn't going to be accessible, right? And so there's companies like DeQ, I know, that are working on creating data sets that are entirely comprised of accessible content so that you can go through and have the output also be accessible. I think we very much need similar things for anybody that's going to be trying to vibe code XR. And then the other aspect of algorithmic bias is that the content will often be discriminatory, right? In the sense that I was just at the M-Enabling Summit, this was actually the Cornell Tech Accessibility Summit. One of the authors was writing that if you put your job application in one of these resume filters, saying things like, I want a scholarship that, has to do with a disability, will actually downgrade your resume compared to others, because from that, it kind of associates your application with, oh, you might be disabled. And because there's so much discrimination that's been captured in the training data, it's going to then downgrade you because clearly disability is something that should be selected against if it's going on past data, right? So things like that, I think we need to make sure that we're screening for. We need to make sure that our data sets don't have these kind of toxic choices baked into them. And we need to make sure that there's always a human in the loop, that it is never an AI just autonomously making these very important decisions without any meaningful oversight. I think both of those, we could easily have an hour-long discussion just on those, but I'll pass it back to y'all and whatever you want to dig into next.
So I want to know what you're excited about. So, one of my favorite movies that regardless of how real some of the things were, Ready Player One, right? Like input outputs, right? Like, these great machines that allow you to be in this like virtual world, and you can feel like with these like, exosuits, right? That responded to what was happening inside the world. So based on some of the technology you see, you've experienced, you've researched, you've used, you see coming out to be like the next generation of technology, what's exciting you the most around what you're seeing with, this new technology that's going to be available to us? Are we getting closer to Ready Player One? Do you want a Ready Player One type of world without like, the giant slum that has like, right? So tell us like, what's exciting you about the future?
Gotcha. Yeah, I wouldn't put Ready Player One as one of my role models for this. I think there's a lot of not so great things about Ready Player One in terms of gatekeeping and microtransactions and addictive tendencies, yada, yada. I think for me, the things that are exciting, I think, first of all, in the augmented reality field, just that ability to bridge the gap for a lot of folks that have disabilities, because the computers, the AIs, can substitute for the senses that maybe you don't have, right? For people that don't have vision, the ability to read signs and maybe even body language. For people that don't have hearing, the ability to have just real-time captions with anybody. I think that opens a lot of doors for people that it may have been closed for before, right? I mean, look at Geordi from Star Trek Next Generation. He had his visor, which is always one of the coolest sci-fi gadgets ever. And that allowed him to not only see in the visible spectrum, but also see into the ultra red and the infraviolet. And like I said, enhance senses beyond what normally people might even have. And the ability to leverage technology like that, I think, is going to be really powerful. And then in the virtual reality space, I think one of the things that really excites me there is that there are a lot of people who have difficulties socializing in real world spaces. And that could be because they have disabilities that prevent them from leaving their home for long periods of time. It could be, for a lot of people who are deaf, there just might not be a lot of other deaf people who can, use sign language nearby. One of the really great interviews I think we did for XR Access was with this group called Helping Hands, which is this big deaf support group in VR chat. That is this huge community of people that are, primarily deaf, but also hearing as well, that get together in VR and can use sign language because of the motion tracking. Not perfectly, because there's a lot of challenges with obscuration and fine motor detail and facial expressions that affect a lot of sign language, but still it creates a space for folks to socialize in, to have a social life, that it could be very difficult to do in just local spaces. The same goes for people who are maybe physically remote. The same goes for people who are maybe, queer in a very small, straight-laced, discriminatory town. I think, like the internet, in general, it gives you the ability to socialize. But I think, unlike the internet, VR lets you really immerse and have deeper human connections, I think, than you would get in a chat room or a forum or even through something like Zoom. Right? When you're in VR, you can feel like you are really there with a person, really there in a space. And that is a really incredible capability. I think we're seeing it used a lot right now for education and training, for things like exposure treatment for PTSD. There's a lot of ways that it could be used, and I'm really excited to see those prosper, and also to see them prosper in a way such that everybody can use them, even if they have, disabilities like blindness or severe motor disabilities or what have you. I want to see a future where we have systems that can accommodate those disabilities and make it a space where everybody can interact freely.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Wow, that's really, really cool vision. What's that one thing that you still like to share that we haven't touched on yet?
I think the biggest one is just that for anybody who is interested in making more accessible XR applications, we have some great resources. For XR Access, we have been working on an XR Access GitHub that has design guidelines, code samples, a lot of what we've been able to collect from across the internet that you could leverage to make your applications more accessible. You can access that just at xraccess.org/GitHub. So xraccess.org/GITHUB. And we also have a YouTube channel that has, I think at this point, dozens or hundreds of seminars with a lot of really skilled researchers, with folks with disabilities talking about their own hopes and dreams for XR. And I would really encourage folks to check those out, and to leverage those, because the more that people don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you want to make something accessible, the better. I would definitely call on some of the platforms like Meta, like Unity, to try to incorporate things like that into their platforms themselves, because that's really, we're never going to have an accessible metaverse if the onus is on every developer to make all of these complicated systems by hand. But I think we can get there eventually if we all just keep accessibility in mind, and keep in mind the fact that every single one of us is disabled at some points in our lives, right? Whether you've got your hands full or you're in a loud bar, or even just when we get old, I don't know about y'all, but I still want to be able to use these technologies when I'm 80 and my hearing and vision has gone to shit. I still want to be able to use them. That's not, charity. That's selfishness on my part of, I want these to be accessible to me when I'm disabled, because that is going to happen sooner or later. And so I think if we can make these things accessible, not just for, some tiny portion of the community that people envision as being the disabled, but because it affects every single one of us, I think that is going to really make it a better world for these technologies going forward.
Cool. Donnell, do you have any questions?
No, I think that was great. It was fantastic. The future, the future imagining, the where we see this thing going, the ability to service so many folks. Like, I thought the cutting the curb idea really was encapsulated it, right? Like, you can create something where you think, oh, I'm just helping one particular group, but it might be used and utilized for so many others. And I thought that was, in particular, what XR seems to present, that opportunity for us. Like, we can create these tools that might, solve a particular problem, but then find out that it has a whole other value chain. So thank you so much for this time today and giving us insight. You shared so many tools I didn't even know about, like the virtual world society. I looked that up, like, wow, and didn't even know this existed. So thank you.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the chance to talk to interested folks about this type of thing. Anybody should absolutely feel free to reach out, probably on LinkedIn or via email. I'm sure we can share that with your folks. And I look forward to chatting to anybody that wants to about XR accessibility.
Yeah, I will put Dylan and Donnell's LinkedIn profile on the descriptions of the podcast. So feel free to reach out, and if you have any questions regarding to XR, AI, and also education. Cool. Awesome. That's it for this episode. Oh, go for it.
Oh, no, that's it for me.
Cool. That's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. We release episodes weekly. If you enjoy this conversation, check out our other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Support us by giving us a follow and a 5-star rating, or subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Thank you, and see you next time.